The UES Dauntless shuddered violently as it breached the atmosphere of Xiphos 7, a planet classified as a Class 0 Deathworld by every galactic standard. No breathable air, no life-sustaining conditions, no chance of survival. Commander Ethan. Graves gripped the console as alarms blared across the ship. "Commander!" Lieutenant Juno Carter shouted over the deafening turbulence. "Gravity fluctuations are off the charts."
"This isn't just a storm. It's like the whole damn planet is pulling us in." "Shields at 18%, Security Officer Vargas called out. "Hull integrity failing. We need to abort." But it was too late. Something grabbed the ship. Not physically. Not
like planetary gravity. This was intentional. The Dauntless was being dragged down. Through the viewport, Ethan saw the surface below, a world of jagged obsidian spires, green lightning streaking across blood-red clouds, and a vast, pulsating
alien structure stretching for miles. It wasn't a mountain. It wasn't a city.
It was something alive, and it was waiting for them. The ship crashed. Metal screamed as it tore apart. Sparks rained down. Ethan blacked out for a moment as his seat restraints barely kept him from being thrown. Then, silence. A moment later, Ethan gasped awake, choking on smoke. The bridge was in ruins. Juno was coughing, a gash on her forehead. Vargas was on his feet already, gun drawn. "Report!" Ethan groaned, pushing himself up. Juno's hands flew across the cracked console.
"Engines are dead. Communications fried. We're stranded." Vargas was staring at the viewport. His face had lost all color. "Commander," he whispered. Ethan turned, and his blood ran cold. Outside they were watching. Tall insectoid figures with obsidian-black exoskeletons, glowing cyan eyes and elongated skulls.
They stood in eerie silence, observing the wreckage with disturbing curiosity. Then, one of them spoke, a deep, clicking voice inside Ethan's head. "Welcome, humans. We have been waiting for you." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The thing, outside, tall, insectoid, and utterly alien, hadn't spoken through sound. The words had landed directly in his mind. Juno shuddered. Did anyone else hear that?" Vargas's grip on his rifle tightened. "Loud and clear. What the
hell are these things?"
Ethan forced himself to think rationally, despite the terror clawing at his chest. These weren't just mindless predators or wild creatures. They were intelligent. They had been waiting for them. "You will exit the vessel now," the voice demanded.
Again cold and emotionless, Ethan's instincts screamed trap. "We are injured," he said, keeping his tone neutral.
"We need time to—" "There is no time." A sudden pressure filled Ethan's skull, an invisible force pushing against his thoughts, as if something was rifling through his mind. His vision blurred for a second, and in that instant he saw things that weren't his memories. A glimpse of massive biomechanical spires stretching into an alien sky. A planet, not Earth, not even human, consumed by these creatures. A species, not just conquerors, but something far worse. Collectors. Ethan gasped and staggered back, clutching his head. The alien outside tilted its elongated skull slightly,
as if it had found something amusing in Ethan's mind. "You understand now. You were never meant to leave this world." Juno's hands shook. "Ethan, I think they just confirmed it. This was a trap." The realization hit like a punch to the
gut. The Dauntless hadn't crashed by accident. These things had pulled them down on purpose. Vargas raised his rifle.
I say we make 'em regret it. Ethan's mind raced. Fighting seemed suicidal, but surrender? No chance. Another voice echoed in his skull, a different one. Smoother, calculated. You misunderstand. This is not a war, it is an experiment. Ethan's
blood ran cold, and you humans are the subjects. Then the hull of the Dauntless shrieked as something ripped it open from the outside. The aliens were coming in. The ship screamed as metal was torn apart like paper. Sparks rained down from the collapsing hull, casting eerie shadows over the ruined bridge. The aliens were inside. Ethan grabbed Juno by the arm, pulling her toward the emergency exit. Vargas was already moving, rifle raised. "Move! Move! Move!" Ethan barked, but before they could escape, the first alien stepped through the breach. Up close it was even more horrifying. Its chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the flickering emergency lights, covered in intricate bioluminescent patterns that pulsed like veins. Its elongated fingers twitched, clawed, and unnaturally precise. Then it moved, too fast. One moment it was standing in the wreckage, the next it was inches from Vargas. Vargas barely had time to scream before the alien's clawed hand lashed out, gripping his rifle, crushing it effortlessly as if it were made of glass. Juno gasped. Ethan reached for his sidearm, but the alien turned its cold, glowing cyan eyes toward him. And then a pulse. Not physical, not sound, but something mental. A sheer, overpowering wave of alien thought slamming into Ethan's brain like a freight train. His vision flickered. His limbs went numb, and then, suddenly, he was somewhere else. Ethan stood in a vast, impossible place. A city, but not made of metal, not of anything human. Towering obsidian spires stretched endlessly into a swirling purple sky, pulsing with an eerie, unnatural glow. The air was thick with static. The ground beneath him was alive, shifting, moving, breathing. And all around him they watched. Hundreds, thousands, the aliens. But this time they weren't just standing there, they were studying him. Not just him. Humanity. Images flooded his mind, memories of human wars, human survival, human brutality, the species that had clawed its way from the mud to the stars, and, for the first time, he felt what the aliens felt. Fear. The realization nearly knocked him off his feet. These creatures, these highly advanced, impossibly powerful beings, were afraid of humans because they had seen what happened when something tried to dominate mankind, and it never ended well. Then the vision collapsed. Ethan gasped as he snapped back into his body. His knees hit the floor of the Dauntless, sweat dripping from his face. Vargas was still frozen in place, his eyes wide, unblinking. He was caught in the same nightmare Ethan had just escaped. Juno clutched Ethan's arm. What the hell was that? Ethan looked up at the alien. For the first time, it hesitated, and that was all Ethan needed. His mind sharpened. The fog cleared. He understood now they weren't just test subjects. They were a threat, and the aliens had no idea what humans were truly capable of. Ethan grinned. A predator's grin. You picked the wrong species to experiment on. Then he grabbed the emergency charge from his belt and detonated it. The explosion tore through the ship. The aliens reeled back in shock. Humans didn't just adapt. They didn't just survive. They fought back. And now the war had just begun. The
explosion ripped through the Dauntless like a shockwave, sending debris flying in all directions. Ethan hit the ground hard, his ears ringing as the blast consumed the front section of the ship. The aliens screeched, a high-pitched, otherworldly
sound of pain and rage as the force sent it sprawling backward. Juno coughed, dragging herself up. "What the hell was that?" An opening. Ethan grabbed her by the arm and yanked her toward the wreckage's far end. "Move!" Vargas groaned nearby, the effects of the alien mind attack finally wearing off. He looked around, confused. Then saw Ethan running. That was all he needed. Instinct took over. He grabbed his sidearm and sprinted after them. Behind them, the aliens were recovering. The explosion had caught them off guard, but they weren't dead.
Not even close. And now they were angry. From the wreckage, more of them emerged, at least a dozen, their glowing cyan eyes now burning with something Ethan hadn't seen before. Hostility. "They're done playing with us," Ethan realized. Then the
chase began. The moment the humans bolted from the wreckage, the aliens moved. Not just running, they glided, their elongated limbs folded inward, and suddenly they were moving in impossible, unnatural ways, like spiders weaving through space itself. And they were fast. The uneven terrain of Sci-Fi 7 stretched before Ethan, like a maze of jagged black stone and thick, pulsing vines. He didn't have a plan, only a direction. Away, Juno's voice was panicked. "They're closing in!" Vargas turned mid-run and fired. The pulse rounds hit one of the creatures dead. Center. This time, something happened. The alien shrieked as its exoskeleton crackled under the blast. It didn't die, but it staggered. Vargas grinned. They're not invincible after all. Ethan filed that away for later. Energy-based weapons hurt them. Good. But that didn't solve their immediate problem. More creatures swarmed from the wreckage, moving in near-perfect synchronization, their twisted limbs shifting as they closed the gap. They weren't hunting. They were herding. Ethan realized the truth a second too late. Shit! Stop! The ground beneath them collapsed. Ethan, Juno, and Vargas tumbled downward as the ground gave way beneath them, sending them plummeting into a dark abyss. The fall was brutal. Sharp rocks and thick vines scraped their bodies as they crashed into something organic. Ethan hit hard, rolling to a stop in a twisted mass of flesh-like roots. His mind spun. He blinked, adjusting to the darkness. Juno groaned nearby. "Where are we?" Vargas coughed. "Better question, where are they?" Ethan looked up. The
aliens stood at the edge of the pit, staring down at them. Then, without a word, they turned and walked away. "What the?" Vargas started. "They just let us go?" "No." Ethan's stomach twisted. "They put us exactly where they wanted us, because this wasn't just a cave. This was something else. The walls pulsed. The ground beneath them felt wrong. And in the darkness, something moved. Something far, far worse than the aliens above."
Juno's scanner flickered. "Ethan!" Her voice shook. We're not alone." Then from the darkness came the growl. Deep, hollow, hungry. The aliens weren't the real threat. They had just thrown the humans into the feeding pit, and whatever lived down here, it had just noticed them. The growl rumbled through the pit, vibrating through the organic walls like a beast exhaling from the depths of some ancient abyss. Ethan's instincts screamed at him, "Run!" but there was nowhere to go. Juno frantically scanned the darkness with her wrist device. I can't get a full reading. It's too big." Vargas aimed his rifle, sweat dripping down his face. "How big?" Juno swallowed hard. "The scanner isn't wide enough to map the whole thing." Ethan's gut twisted. That meant one thing. Whatever was in here with them was colossal. Then the shadows moved. A massive limb, thick, covered in writhing tendrils and glistening with something wet, slid across the cavern floor. The air became thick, humid, and wrong. Then came the eyes. Not 2, not 10, hundreds, all over the ceiling, the walls, blinking in eerie unison, reflecting a sickly green light from deep within the creature's impossible form. A voice hissed through. "Their minds." "You were brought here to be consumed," Juno gasped. "It's telepathic, too, like the others." Ethan gritted his teeth. "No, this thing is older. The others, they serve it." Vargas didn't hesitate. He fired. The pulse round struck one of the glowing eyes, and the cavern itself screamed. A horrible, ear-piercing shriek that nearly shattered their skulls. The walls convulsed, thick tendrils lashing out like whips, slamming into the ground, inches from Ethan's feet. Juno screamed, "Ethan, it's waking up!" The creature stirred. The mass of tendrils shifted, revealing what could only be described as a maw, a spiraling abyss of jagged teeth, opening wider, wider, big enough to swallow. A starship. Ethan's mind worked fast. The aliens had fed them to this thing for a reason, which meant there had to be a way out. Vargas kept firing, pulse rounds tearing into the tendrils. The beast howled in rage, but it wasn't enough to kill it. Juno's scanner beeped wildly.
"There! A heat signature above us! An opening!" Ethan's eyes locked onto it. A crack in the cavern ceiling. A way out, but getting there.
That was another problem entirely. The monster lunged. The monster lunged. Ethan shoved Juno aside as a massive tendril slammed into the ground where she had been standing. The cavern shook violently, and the organic walls twisted as the creature's many eyes glowed brighter, focused solely on them now. Vargas kept firing, his pulse rounds ripping into the writhing mass of flesh, but it was too big. Every shot barely seemed to slow it down. Ethan locked his gaze on the crack in the cavern ceiling. Their only way out. "Juno, can your scanner detect a weak point in the structure?" he shouted. Juno's fingers flew over the controls. "Yes, the outer shell is thinner near the edge of the breach. If we hit it with enough force, it might collapse, but we need more firepower." Ethan's mind raced. They didn't have heavy explosives, and their pulse rifles wouldn't cut it. Then,
An idea hit him. "The creature is connected to this place, right?"
he said. "If we hit it hard enough, it might thrash and break the ceiling for us." Vargas smirked. "You want to piss it off until it brings the roof down on itself?" "Exactly," Ethan said grimly. "We need a big shot. All of us. Focused."
On one of its core eyes. Juno's scanner beeped. "There! The largest eye! Center mass!" Ethan nodded. "On my mark, fire everything you've got." The creature sensed what they were about to do. The cavern contracted, the walls closing. "In! Tendrils whipping toward them, now!" Ethan roared. They fired. A barrage of pulse rounds slammed into the massive central eye. The creature's scream was deafening, reverberating through the entire pit. Its body convulsed violently, and just as Ethan had hoped, the cavern ceiling began to crack.
Chunks of organic rock fell from above. The opening widened, light from the alien sky is streaming in. But the creature was still moving. It wasn't dead yet, and one last tendril shot out, directly toward Juno. Ethan acted without
thinking.
He threw himself in the way. The impact sent him flying, his body crashing hard against the cavern floor. "Ethan!" Juno screamed. Pain exploded through his ribs, but he forced himself up. "Go! Climb!" Vargas grabbed Juno and they scrambled.
Toward the breach. Ethan stumbled after them, his vision blurring. The creature let out a final howl, its massive body collapsing in on itself as the ceiling gave way. With a final, desperate leap, Ethan lunged toward the light, and the world
Vanished in a blinding explosion of debris.
Ethan gasped for air. They were outside. On the jagged cliffs of Xiphos 7, staring down at the ruined cavern below. Dust and smoke rose from the wreckage. The monster was gone. They had escaped. Vargas lay on his back, panting. "I can't believe that worked." Juno collapsed beside Ethan, clutching his arm. "You're hurt." Ethan waved her off, still catching his breath. "I'll live." Then the ground trembled again. Juno paled.
"No, it's not over." Ethan turned toward the horizon, toward the ruins of the Dauntless. The aliens were still there. Dozens of them, standing, watching, their glowing cyan eyes locked onto the three surviving humans. And at the center of them, a figure unlike the rest, taller, armored, more regal. Its mind voice thundered into Ethan's skull. "You should not have survived." Ethan clenched his fists. "Yeah, humans have a habit of doing that." The alien tilted its head, considering. "Them, we miscalculated. Your kind is dangerous." A pause, then something Ethan didn't expect. "You are free to leave." Ethan froze. Juno and Vargas exchanged stunned glances. "What?" Juno whispered. The alien narrowed its eyes. "You were meant to be broken, but instead you adapted, fought back. You have proven unpredictable. That is why we fear you." Ethan took a shaky breath. He understood now. This wasn't just an experiment, it was a test, and somehow humanity had passed. The aliens stepped back, allowing them passage toward the ruins of their ship. Vargas was the first to move. "So, we just walk away?" Ethan exhaled sharply. "For now." They had won a battle, but Ethan knew the truth. This was just the beginning. Because somewhere out there, in the void between the stars, the rest of the galaxy had just learned a terrifying truth. Humans don't break, they endure, and one day they would be back.